Wow, there was no teacher voices needed there. So welcome everyone. My name is Jackie Mann and I'm SCPOR's Executive Director. Really want to welcome you here today to Mapping the Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research in Saskatchewan. And really want to thank everyone for coming today for this important gathering of the SPOR Networks. Patients, researchers, research staff, students, and others who have joined us. And I'd also like to offer a special acknowledgement and welcome to Elder George Laliberty, who's with us here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candace Grappick, and I'm a patient partner with both the SCPOR Support Unit and also with the Primary Integrated Health Care for Innovation Network, which that took all of my time, and so we fondly call it the Picky Network.
Awesome. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, and Dakota Nations and homeland of the Métis. Saskatoon is located on Treaty 6 territory. As a settler here, I recognize that the relationship between SCPOR and the Indigenous peoples of this land is guided by the relationships outlined in treaty. In my leadership role at SCPOR, I'm committed to supporting work that will help to move past the previously destructive history of research in Indigenous communities and forward toward mutually beneficial patient-oriented research. SCPOR is the Saskatchewan Centre for Patient-Oriented Research and is Saskatchewan's support unit. When CIHR announced the strategy for patient-oriented research about 5 years ago, there were really the two arms, the support units being one, and then of course the SPOR Networks being the other arm. The support units are embedded in each province across the country, and they really function to provide support for research teams who are doing patient-oriented research. The SPOR Networks are targeted areas of research that span across select provinces and are national in scope. And obviously the SPOR Networks and support units can work together under the umbrella of SPOR. So now just for a little bit of a confession, I started working with SCPOR last fall, and it was when I had the opportunity to attend the National Summit in November for patient-oriented research in the country that I really understood the importance of SCPOR working closely with the SPOR Networks and understanding exactly what the SPOR Networks do. So I guess I have to give a huge thank you to Charlene and Chris for making it a priority to create this gathering today for us to share what's going on in the networks. So the purpose today is really for us to learn about the networks that have representation in Saskatchewan.
So just to acknowledge that the SPOR networks that are presenting today include the Canadians Seeking Solutions and Innovations to Overcome Chronic Kidney Disease Network, otherwise known as CanSolve, CKD Network. I don't know why the networks have these interesting names. The Chronic Pain Network, Diabetes Action Canada, and the Primary and Integrated Healthcare for Innovations Network, otherwise known as PICI. So we'll just do a few housekeeping items first before we begin. Please check at the registration desk if you haven't already done so for your name tag and for your package of information. If you're dialed in via WebEx, you will be on mute throughout the duration of the presentations just to ensure good sound quality. If anyone on WebEx has any IT issues, could you type them into the chat box? And we have SCPOR staff who are monitoring that, so they can help you with that. The bathrooms are located out the door and to your right for both men's and women's.
Great, thanks Candace. So we're going to start off with a brief presentation about SCPOR and new things that are happening there. No pressure, Chris. The whole SCPOR team is here today, so good opportunity there. Then we're going to have a presentation from each of the networks, and after that we'll do Q&A. And then at 2:45, we'll end the Q&A, head over to another room, which we'll show you where that is, for open networking. So keep an eye out for who's speaking that you want to talk to when the open networking happens, and you'll have that opportunity. And we'll also have snacks and coffee available when that happens.
Just before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge all of the patients who are here today. It's a really critical piece of patient-oriented research, so I would like to send a special thank you to all of you. Would you just raise your hands so we can see who you are? Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming. So we'd now like to welcome SCPOR's Methods Platform Facilitator, Chris Pliszka, to do a brief presentation on SCPOR and the new things that SCPOR is working on. Chris?
Thank you. All right, so we'll start with a little bit of background on SCPOR, and then we'll get into some of the new initiatives that are going on. I'll acknowledge that I can't cover everything. I've only been given 10 minutes here. So to everyone out there at SCPOR, apologies if I missed what you're working on, but it's a great reason to come check out our website. Make sure you're up to date on all the new happenings. So as mentioned, SCPOR is the Saskatchewan Centre for Patient-Oriented Research, and we're Saskatchewan's support unit for patient-oriented research. We're supported by the Canadian Institutes for Health Research under Canada's Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research initiative. So we're one of 11 support units across the country. There's a support unit in every province and territory, except for the Maritimes that have combined together to create a single support unit. And as the name suggests, we're here to provide guidance and assistance for researchers conducting patient-oriented research. We don't actually do any of the research ourselves. So SCPOR's mission is to build capacity and collaborations to conduct responsive, equitable, innovative patient-oriented research that continuously improves the care and health of Saskatchewan people. And you can see our tagline there: engaging patients, supporting research, improving health together. So next I'll note that we have 8 partner organizations. So these are the University of Saskatchewan, University of Regina, Sask Poly, Government, or Saskatchewan Health Authority, Government of Saskatchewan, SHRF, HQC, and eHealth. We work with these organizations in a number of ways. So at the top, SCPOR is governed by an oversight committee, and this includes representation from those different partner organizations, but it also includes representation from patient and family advisors, and it's going to expand to include Indigenous leaders in the future. Next, we have our scientific and executive director. So our scientific director is Malcolm King, who's going to be presenting later in the day, and one of our wonderful MCs, Jackie Mann. Next, we have our different platforms. That's the Methods platform, Knowledge Translation and Capacity Building platform, Patient Engagement platform, Data, and then Indigenous Research and Engagement Expertise platform. I'll note that all the platforms are happy to talk with you if anyone has questions, areas that they think they could use advice on. So feel free to contact the platforms. Everyone's really open to receiving emails and happy to meet with anyone. Finally, I'll note that 3 of the 6 platform leads are in our partner organizations, so just points to how closely tied we are with these organizations. So that would be places like HQC and eHealth. So a little bit of our history. In 2015, then the business plan for SCPOR was submitted to CIHR. In 2016, SCPOR started. And then in 2017, our executive and scientific director were recruited, and there was the official SCPOR launch. Next, I'll note in 2018, there was a renewal of the governance, and our strategic plan was created. That was kind of an exciting time for us. It brought a lot of momentum going forward. So in 2019 and 2020, we see a ramping up of patient-oriented activities according to the strategic plan. You might be able to tell we've been putting on a few more events recently, trying to keep everyone engaged. And in 2021, we'll complete the first 5-year grant cycle. So the process to apply for SCPOR 2.0 is anticipated from CHR sometime this fall. So we're excited to figure out how we're going to go forward with this. Next would be a few examples of how SCPOR supports patient-oriented research. So the first thing I'll touch on is our strategy for patient-oriented research, or SPOR modules. So these are modules that are introduction to patient-oriented research. They're offered on generally a monthly basis in both Saskatoon and Regina, and located at other places if there's demand for them. So we've had modules in La Ronge and PA in the past. And these are for both patients and researchers. They provide the basis for what is patient-oriented research and how to engage in patient-oriented research, and provide a great framework on how patients and researchers can work together to make sure that they're creating productive research teams. In addition, we've worked with IPHRC, or the Indigenous Peoples Health Research Center, to create the Building Research Relationships with Indigenous Communities, or BRIC modules, training modules. And these are offered generally once a month, either in Saskatoon or Regina. I think there's some interest in expanding them beyond that, but they've been well received. They provide an overview on how to engage with Indigenous communities, and this is a half-day session. In addition, we've been working on the development of tools to help encourage and facilitate patient-oriented research. One of these tools is the Patient-Oriented Research Level of Engagement Tool, or PORLET. Everyone should have a copy of that in the handout you received at the beginning. And the PORLET is used as a guide to measure the degree to which patient-oriented research projects meet the research criteria defined by CAHR in their strategy for patient-oriented research. This was a response to patient concerns. Patients were assisting with grant reviews, and they noted that it was hard to objectively and consistently evaluate different proposals. So we worked with patients to develop this tool. Next, we've recently worked to develop SCPOR's Affiliated Researcher Alliance. And the idea here is to bring together all the researchers who are engaged in patient-oriented research, provide opportunities to bring those researchers together. So there's a few benefits that are associated with this. These include things like reduced fees for services at SCPOR's affiliated labs. We also provide networking opportunities for these researchers. In addition, we've been working on the development of different knowledge translation products for these researchers. So we're trying to develop 5-minute videos highlighting the patient and the researcher perspective on different research projects that are going on, and do about one of those per month. And next, we're working on creating a searchable database of these researchers, highlighting the projects that they're working on, their areas of expertise, some of their publications, just as a resource to know what's going on out there, who you can approach for rounding out patient-oriented research teams. And finally, I'll note that working to ensure we're communicating with these researchers on a regular basis, so just staying in touch, figure out what they need from us, how we can best support them. One of the initiatives that came out of the Affiliated Researcher Alliance was networking events. So we're putting on monthly meet-and-eat events. And this is an opportunity for researchers to showcase what they're doing. So we showcase one research team, kind of what they've been working on, what they've learned from that research, what they've learned from engaging with patients, and then have an opportunity for open networking afterwards. So a free lunch and then half hour, 45 minutes, just to meet with everybody else in the room, talk about what they're doing, and potentially round out those research teams. Next, I'll make mention of our data and data services platform. So this platform is focused on ensuring access to high-quality data and information through eHealth and HQC. They offer data consultations in order to facilitate patient-oriented research. As mentioned before, all our platforms are open to consultations. If you ever have any questions, feel free to get in touch with them. They can also assist with things like privacy and governance. They can provide data analyst support and assist with registry development. They also have a goal to establish infrastructure to improve access to high-quality health-related data throughout the province. Next, I'll highlight some of our trainee funding opportunities. So right now, we've collaborated with IPHRC to offer the IPHRC and SCPOR Awards. So this is available to researchers at the University of Regina, First Nations University of Canada, University of Saskatchewan, or SaskPoly, for trainees who are conducting research related to Indigenous health, as long as this research involves and benefits Indigenous communities. So there's PhD funding at $30,000 per year, master's funding at $20,000 per year, and postdoc funding at $70,000 per year, available to trainees in that area. We also offer some matching funding opportunities to trainees at the U of S right now. So there's postdoc funding that will match up to, there's PhD funding where we'll match up to $15,000 per year. I believe there's 8 positions available. And the deadline for that is July 12th. And there's also postdoc funding where SCPOR will match up to $27,000 per year. There's 6 positions available, but that's due that closes at the end of the week. But I think there has been some discussion of future trainee funding being available. So just keep your eye on the website to stay up to date on that. Next, I'll note our collaboration with SCHRF to offer patient-oriented research funding opportunities. So the big funding opportunity right now is the SPOR grants, which have been announced for 2019 and 2020. So this offers $180,000 per team for 2 years. The important dates for that are the eligibility check, which is October 2nd, and the application deadline, which is November 26th. And finally, I just wanted to present a little bit about how our services wrap around researchers. So this is an example of one of the researchers we worked with. So they got training for themselves and their patients through the SPOR modules. They received consultations through the Indigenous Engagement and Expertise platform. They also received PITA funding, which is $2,500 to engage patients during the conceptualization of a research project, get patients involved in coming up with the research idea, and being involved with the grant writing process. That was previously available only during Sprout grants, but it's now offered year-round. Looks like I'm getting kicked off the stage here, but I'll note that you can check us out at skipper.ca. Check out our YouTube videos that not only highlight the research that's going on, but also have recordings for some of these workshops, or check out our Twitter or our newsletter through the Skipper website.
Great job, Chris. Thank you. So you will notice we just have a timekeeper reminder with some yellow signs for presenters. So just a heads up on that to keep us on track. So next we'd like to invite the first SPOR Network team to present. So I want to welcome Dr. Joanne Koppel and Dr. Carol Boulin to present on the CanSolve CKD network. Dr. Koppel is a clinical professor of medicine in the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. And I remember running into Dr. Koppel shortly after that conference I was telling you about and saying to her, hey, we need to talk. I need to learn more about your network. And so here we are today. Dr. Boulin is an assistant professor with the College of Nursing at the University of Saskatchewan. And of course, I especially want to welcome Elder George Laliberty, who's part of their research team and is here with us today. Elder George is originally from Beauval, but now lives in Saskatoon. He has worked with the First Nations and Métis Centre for the Saskatoon Hospitals for many years and has been instrumental in guiding the CanSolve CKD project to support proper protocol and ceremony and has opened many doors in the Métis and First Nations community. So please join me in welcoming this awesome team.
Great. Thank you for inviting us to speak here today. So we're going to talk about Canadians seeking solutions and innovations to overcome chronic kidney disease, the CanSolve CKD network. So this is a pan-Canadian patient-oriented research network that has 3 core words: listening, learning, and leading. And we're listening to, learning from, and leading with patients, caregivers, policymakers, researchers, and clinicians. So in partnership with patients, researchers, and healthcare providers, together with policymakers from across Canada, we're working to try to transform the treatment and care for Canadians living with or at risk for kidney disease. So our vision for the network is by 2020, every Canadian with or at high risk for chronic kidney disease will receive the best recommended care, experience optimal outcomes, and have the opportunity to participate in studies with novel therapies regardless of age, sex, gender, location, or ethnicity. So this is the governance of the network. And what you can see is that patients and caregivers are at the center of this structure. So we have an Indigenous Patients Engagement and Research Council, and we also have a Patient Council. And around this, we have a knowledge user and a knowledge translation committee, of which I am one of the co-chairs, along with a policymaker from the Ontario Renal Network. We also have a pediatrics committee, and then we have a research training and mentorship committee as well. This is we're taken care of by an extremely great core operations team that's based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and overarching is a steering committee that guides the operation of the network. And on the steering committee are multiple patients and caregivers. We have a research operations committee that makes sure that they keep my toes to the fire and all researchers' toes to the fire so that we complete and honor what we are supposed to do within the Council of CKD network. And interestingly, we also have an international research advisory committee. So on that international research advisory committee, we have people from the UK, the United States, and Australia. And that is to ensure that we also are keeping ourselves focused, but also to encourage international collaboration within our network. So over a period of 2 years, it seems like eons ago, patients, caregivers, clinicians, researchers, policymakers came together to do a priority setting exercise. And that priority setting exercise then came up with 3 research themes. And theme 1 is to identify kidney disease earlier and to support those who are at greatest risk of negative outcomes. And within each theme, there are various research projects. So there are 18 research projects throughout the CanSolve CKD network. The first ones in theme 1 are identifying CKD risk in youth with diabetes. The second one is identifying diabetes and CKD in Indigenous communities. And the star here is that this is really a public health initiative. It's not really a research project. It's a well-developed screening program to screen for chronic kidney disease in Indigenous communities. And in Saskatchewan, we're right now in the process of trying to operationalize this actual public health initiative. And so we've started with the Meadow Lake Tribal Council is now looking at a screening program, just had a meeting with them last week, and the All Nations Healing Hospital in Fort Qu'Appelle has initiated part of a screening program as well. There are other themes and research projects under Theme 1 that you can see, looking at personalizing treatment for people with autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, which is an inherited disease. 1 in 1,000 people have that abnormal gene. We're looking at risk-based care for people with CKD in the community to identify those who are at high risk, and then looking at a risk prediction to support shared decision-making for managing heart disease, which heart disease is the most common complication of CKD. Theme 2 is to define the best treatments to improve outcomes and quality of life for people that have chronic kidney disease. So there are novel interventions to prevent loss of kidney function, to look at repurposing drugs for the treatment of polycystic kidney disease, to look at aldosterone inhibition. I don't want to get too much into the science of this, and to assess and manage symptoms in patients who have advanced CKD. So patients have identified that itch that they have when they have chronic kidney disease is really debilitating, and they want something done about it. And then the third theme is to define optimal ways to deliver patient-centered care in the 21st century. So this is restructuring care. So why do patients and their caregivers have to travel 5 and 6 hours to see a kidney doctor? So that's that's part of that theme. Then there's strategies to enhance patient self-management. So that star there means that our team has been giving clinical expertise to this project. And then theme 3.3a, which is improving Indigenous patient knowledge about treatment options for failing kidneys, is what Dr. Bolen is going to be talking to you about in a minute. And then the other research project within this theme 3 is to increase the use of living donor kidney transplantation as a treatment for end-stage kidney disease. So with that, Dr. Bolen is going to talk about our project.
Thank you. I'm not used to using a microphone, just my teaching voice. But anyways, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our project, Improving Indigenous Patient Knowledge about Treatment Options for Failing Kidneys. So I thought that very basically then we'll just highlight the problem, the purpose, and the population. So First of all, the problem or the issue is that currently there are very few culturally appropriate co-developed educational tools for Indigenous peoples with failing kidneys. And therefore, the purpose of our research or our project is to look at facilitating Indigenous patient-centered self-management for kidney health, and ultimately empowering the individuals to be able to make an informed decision about their treatment option for failing kidneys. The population for our particular project is elders, Indigenous peoples, families, and caregivers affected by CKD, in addition to healthcare providers. What I'd like to mention here is, while Saskatchewan is the overall lead on this particular project, we are working with Vancouver and Thunder Bay as partners, and that's why we've got those 3 arrows on the map there, just to show you that while, like I said, we're sort of the hub, and then we work in conjunction with the other two, and we'll talk about that just shortly in terms of what we're doing. So I have 2 following slides addressing the research gap. The first slide we'll be looking at addressing the research gap in Saskatchewan, and then the second one will be within Thunder Bay and Vancouver. So in addressing the research gap then, there's a couple of sort of, I guess, areas that I just like to highlight on. That's patient-partner relationships, our elder on contract, and the importance of sending a positive message about kidney health. That's really influenced our approach to the research so far. So in addressing this gap then, we have an elder on contract, so Elder George. Elder George. Hi, Elder George. Elder George is on contract with us, and he's been absolutely invaluable in working alongside of us, with us together in doing this project. He's provided guidance and direction in terms of the cultural aspects of doing Indigenous research. He's helped us to be able to understand the importance of ceremony in the Indigenous culture. So, for example, us as researchers, the research team, have been immersed in Indigenous culture by participating, and I'm still standing here to talk about it, participating in 2 sweat lodges, pipe ceremony, smudging, a feast ceremony, and other events. As well, each of our research meetings, we begin our research meetings with presentation of tobacco to Elder George, followed by a prayer from Elder George. So every single meeting is begun that way. So with our elder on contract then, so as I said, it allows for that researcher immersion and understanding those particular aspects of Indigenous culture that will help us in working with the community, as well as in terms of patient-partner relationship. So I've included the elder as a patient-partner relationship, but also in terms of working with the community members. We've developed partnership in, as you can see, they're co-developing 7 video modules to date. So we've got the 7 modules are how do kidneys work, how to keep your kidneys healthy, introduction to treatment options, peritoneal dialysis, hemodialysis, kidney transplant, and conservative kidney management. And each one of those we've developed in conjunction with our first group in Isle La Crosse. We also took that particular feedback in the development. We presented it to Elder George in terms of, you know, his input and that on the content of the video. And then what we'll be doing coming up in July is we'll be meeting with our second group in North Battleford at the Treaty 6 Health Center, where we have a group there. We just met with them last week, and we had 17 participants, which was excellent for a focus group. And we're going to be bringing these selected videos to them for their input for further working on is how do they, you know, what do they think about those in terms of providing information. And then finally, also with direction from Elder George, we look at the importance of sending a positive message about kidney disease, about kidney health, so that we don't want to approach it from the negative aspect. We want to focus on our research from a strength-based approach. So wellness versus disease. So that was in Saskatchewan. So this is addressing the research gap in Thunder Bay and Vancouver. So what they've done is that they already have a number of previously developed educational tools. So what they're doing is they're going to be using those tools and with subsequent modification in using the evaluation guides and tools that we have right now. So they've got their materials, whereas in Saskatchewan we're developing from the ground up new materials. They're going to look at their materials that they presently have, get feedback from the participants, and then do future modifications on them. So again, the questions are pretty open-ended on the interview guide. So, what, as we did last week, what do you know about kidney disease? What do you think about, what you've learned so far from your healthcare provider? How would you like to see this information delivered? The big one that we saw last week was what is most important to you? What do you really want to know about kidney disease? And it was quite interesting. We also have, in terms of once the information is presented, the type of evaluation tool there. So we have a sort of a pictorial evaluation tool there that they ask the participants to circle the answer that best fits for them and comment where you would like why or why not. So during today's session, I felt like I learned a lot about the options available when kidneys get worse. Where do they fall in that, and what would they like to know about that, or, that. And then finally, in terms of next steps, we are hopefully, or the intended goal or aim of our project is the impact and the outcomes that we have listed here. So we want to, which we have so far, but of course we're going to have further modification of our videos as some information presentation, co-developed, culturally appropriate toolkit that should provide a clear understanding of kidney health. So therefore, as a result of having information, empowerment to make decisions about kidney treatment, and then increase the quality of life. Back to Joanne.
So the patient engagement, as I told you, there was an Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council and a Patient Council, and they're involved in all aspects of our network. We have now Wabish Ki Bishiku Sanich. It's a learning pathway that aims to enhance researchers' knowledge and awareness of racial biases, Indigenous voices and stories, and the impact of colonization on Indigenous health and culturally safe health research practices. So patients are engaged in all aspects of the network, in study design, execution, interpretation, result dissemination, and publications. And have we got it right all the time? No. So by 2020, we hope to have better identification, improved access, and better health system efficiency. And with that, thank you.
Sorry.
Crack the whip. Whoa. So thank you to Joanne and Carol for your great presentation. I'm sure some of you might have questions, but if you don't mind, we're just going to hold questions to the end and then allow it at that time. So I would like to welcome Krista Berg, Casey McMahon, and Janet Gunderson to speak about the Chronic Pain Network. Krista is a clinician and faculty member in the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. Casey is a research coordinator with the Chronic Pain Network, and Janet is a patient and family advisor with the Chronic Pain Network and is part of SCPOR's Patient and Family Advisory Council.
Okay, so this may be very short if I can't figure out how to make my links work. So, no, oh yeah, well, that was me advancing a slide. So I guess we answered a few of the questions here. So I'm the local PI for the Chronic Pain Network for Saskatchewan, and I happen to be a pediatrician. So our network here has a pediatric focus. And Casey is our research coordinator, and you can find her at stoppain@usask.ca. And then Janet, you're going to get a chance to talk as well. Okay. So basically, our network is made up of all the network members. We also have a project team for our particular project, and that includes Susan Tupper, who is also right here, and Alan Finley, who is from IWK. And that project is in collaboration with all the Canadian pediatric pain clinics. I'll talk a little bit more about that after. And then we have all of the chronic pain network committees. So there's a patient committee, an Indigenous engagement committee, a registry one, and then each of the sub-projects has their own, study group. As well, we have a clinical research network that is made up of 12 clinics across the country, and 4 of them are pediatric. The 4 pediatric ones are IWK, Saskatchewan, Toronto, and Alberta, of course. So, yes, now this is what our website looks like. This is the big test. Okay. So, Chronic Pain Network. So, on our main home site, you'll find just an overview. Our project was recently recognized by the Canadian Pediatric Society because of the nature of the work on complex regional pain syndrome, which is a severe debilitating chronic pain disorder in children. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that project. Thomas is in Regina, and so Saskatchewan's getting the front page here as it happens. In terms of the team, it's all laid out here in terms of the principal applicants and the patient partners. So these are the principal applicants from all across the country, and then all of the co-applicants are the project leads. And I got the alphabetical sort of, so I'm first. But so these are all of the PIs related to the projects. The patient partners are also there, and you'll see Janet's picture in there too. And in terms of what we do, this explains how the research projects make up a substantial part of the way that the network is designed. So Aboriginal Children's Hurt and Healing Initiative, lots of things to do with pediatrics, biobanking. Here's our project here. Chronic pain, a fair amount of disorders in adulthood as well. And this is an app that's also supposed to help with self-management of young adults with chronic pain. So many of you may not realize that chronic pain is actually very common. So it affects about 20% of the adult population. So 1 in 5 people suffer from chronic pain. It actually costs more in lost productivity and health utilization than cancer and cardiac disease combined. So it's a huge cost in terms of quality of life and in terms of healthcare utilization. And in the past, there was an expectation that treating an underlying disorder might just manage the pain and the pain would go away. The most common example of that would be, a sprained ankle. When it heals, it stops hurting. But with chronic pain, the pain continues after the tissue healing has occurred. And so this project acknowledges chronic pain as a chronic health condition that becomes a beast of its own that needs to be researched, better understood, and treated head on. So on the website here, this is examples of ways that people can get involved in our network. So if you're a patient or a researcher, you can subscribe to the mailing list and start getting information. Different things that are recruiting and whatnot are here. And then we also have the resources list. So there's some resources that might be similar to what the SPOR network has, but more applicable to pain-related projects. And then there's also a list of the chronic pain clinics across the country that may be helpful for patients as well. So let's see here. So I think I pretty much covered that. So the goal of our network is to support, coordinate, and synchronize leading innovative and high-impact research while removing barriers to chronic pain management. And our project here is on complex regional pain syndrome in children and youth. If that's something that you're particularly interested in, you can find us on the Canadian Pediatric Surveillance Program website. And it's always a mouthful to say the CPSP study of CRPS. So so our protocol is here, our case definition, and the questionnaire for physicians to download if they're reporting a case. And this project was launched in September 2017 and goes on for 2 years. And during that time, over 2,800 pediatricians and pain clinic directors across the country are surveyed monthly. So 2,800 physicians reporting monthly for a 2-year survey period. And if they get a new case of complex regional pain syndrome, they would flag the case, and then it would come through the Canadian Pediatric Surveillance Network to a website that's in collaboration with the Public Health Agency of Canada, where the data is stored until it's sent back to us at the mothership. So that's Casey. Yes. So right now, I think we have about 200 cases flagged over 2 years, and we've done some preliminary analysis and a few presentations on that, and the cases are still rolling in. We may extend the survey the study period another year. We're still deciding on that. So right now, we're kind of in a data collection phase, and that's given us some time to support other projects and to build capacity for local research. We've had medical students with us doing different projects on the ward. We've also participated in some projects that we've had opportunities to work with through the network. So an example of that is the Pediatric Chronic Pain Registry. So we launched the Saskatchewan Registry in January 2018. And so all of our pain patients that come to the pediatric pain clinic in Saskatoon fill in validated scales related to their pain management, and a core data set is collected that has been kind of agreed upon by our pediatric registry working group. And at that time, they have the opportunity to indicate if they want to have their data used for research or just for clinical purposes, because we use the same forms. So we've been recruiting to that since January 2018. And also, we've been involved with something called the Partnering for Pain project. This was possible because of our collaboration through the network. We put in a CIHR patient engagement grant and received funding for a quick project to determine the top 10 research priorities in pediatric pain management. So this research team is made up of an interdisciplinary team of psychologists, physician, patients, parents, and we created a survey, and that was a national survey, and then patients and parents were brought together for a focus group to prioritize the information coming in from that survey. And now a paper manuscript has been submitted regarding this, and the patient and parent partners are included as authors as well on that submission. So it's under review right now, and a video has been created that I could not get the link to work because my Dropbox is full. But eventually we'll tweet it. And then the other one so that's a project that's started and finished since we've started our network here. And the I Can Cope project is one that we're just in the process of our data sharing agreements. That's always been a bit of a hurdle when across the different provincial boundaries. So we're working on our data sharing agreement, and then youth will have an opportunity to pilot this app that can help with self-management of chronic pain. So I should have mentioned that chronic pain is very similar in youth. So it's also about 1 in 5 youth will have meet criteria for chronic pain, and the peak age of onset is around age 14. People often don't realize that. So how are patients engaged in the network? I showed you kind of how they're listed on the website, and they're involved in every aspect of the network. And Janet is going to, I'm assuming, talk to you more about that in detail. So both priority setting, project evaluation. I guess I kind of talked about all of these things already. The only thing I didn't mention was that because pain research is quite early, we're looking at improving just the understanding of the frequency of some of the disorders and the pain or disease trajectory of pain as a primary disorder. So some of the research is quite foundational.
The Chronic Pain Network, here's the logo, as you've seen. We're a national organization, but the headquarters, or the institution it's run out of, is in Hamilton. What am I doing wrong here, Chris? Oh, okay. The goals of the network were a national collaboration of patients, researchers, healthcare professionals, educators, industry and government policy advisors, and to direct new research in chronic pain, to train researchers and clinicians, and to translate research findings into knowledge and policy. The CPN aims to increase access to the care for people living with pain and to speed the translation of the knowledge that we gain from the research. This is a diagram of our governance. The steering committee is made up of principal applicants that oversee the network as a whole. On each of these committees, we have a patient as a co-chair. I'm part of the patient engagement committee, and we meet via Zoom, as well as in-person meetings at our annual general meeting and an in-person meeting in the fall. We communicate using Basecamp. I find Basecamp and Zoom easy to use. I find Basecamp really easy to use because you can follow a conversation easier than an email because all of the comments are in one spot. At our last conference, we met in person, all of the committees together, and it was really nice to find out what the other committees were doing. In previous years, they've presented to us during our Zoom meetings or at the annual general meeting. This is a map that shows the institutions with the star, and the research projects, and then, of course, the patients in the different projects. The patient partners work on projects. Initially, we were given a list of the projects, the title, and a short description about them, and then we were asked to state which ones we were interested in. Then we were assigned a project, not always the one that you were interested in the most. I got lucky. After the initial Zoom meeting was arranged by the CPN, and they also attended that meeting. Zoom is kind of like Skype, for those of you who don't know, but more efficient, I think. So the patient, the primary investigator, and the CPN attended that meeting, and then the following meetings were via Zoom between the primary investigator and the patient or their team, or email, phone, or in person, depending on if they live close enough. The patient partner often does not live in the same city or even the same province where the research is happening. We faced several challenges. One of the biggest challenges was that many of the projects had started before the patients came on board. So if the project starts before the patients are recruited, that isn't an ideal situation, but that's the way it had to be. I don't think the CPN could have avoided those challenges. One of the projects I was paired out of was run at Laval University in Quebec City. It's a clinical trial using magnetic stimulation of the brain for lower back pain. I initially met with the PI via Zoom, and was sent several articles on the topic. I read them and some others that I found and emailed back questions. We connected again via Zoom. It was an interesting topic to me, but it was a clinical trial that had already started, and I don't really know how patient engagement could have been incorporated at that point. I also was paired on another project about pain, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. I will admit that I felt uncomfortable with this topic because I had no experience with it. I met the researcher via Zoom and email. They're out of Winnipeg. I did not really think I was much help to her. I was sent several articles to read, and then 2 articles were published from the research, and I did comment on those, and I guess I'm listed as an author. At the initial meeting with her, I asked if there were any coping techniques that were taught to the patients that focused on positive thinking and different coping techniques. I didn't think too much of the question. Just this spring, I received an email from the researcher stating that the question had stuck with her and she wanted to focus some of her future research on protective factors of suicide among chronic pain patients. They will be looking at social supports, regular exercise, spirituality, and things like that. I will be reviewing the paper when it's done. I don't think this is totally part of her CPN work. I don't feel that either project was an ideal example of patient engagement, but the types of projects that they were in the distance played a factor. We do have several examples, really good examples in the CPN with patient engagement. Some of the solutions we came up with. In the governance with a patient on each committee, we feel very comfortable stating our concerns. So that led to some problem solving. During our regular meeting, the patients expressed a desire to learn more about the different projects within the CPN. The Patient Engagement Committee decided to host presentations by research teams every 2 months. Sometimes the trainees even did the presentations. These meetings are available to all patient partners within the CPN. The Patient Engagement Group decided to create a 1-page document on how to engage with patients and another 1-page document on tips about research conversations with patients. And both those documents can be found on our website under the documents section. And that's the website that Dr. Berg showed you. This is an overview of our projects. You can see that we have basic science, population surveys, behavioral science, and clinical trials that are running. Some projects are in their final stages, and others are just in the midway point. Looking forward, some of the projects the networks hope to grow are the Registry Working Group and the implementation of a common data set across Canada. We just had a presentation about that to our group. The CPN is providing support in the development of the Canadian Pain Strategy. 2 of our patients are currently part of the National Pain Task Force, and 2 of our primary investigators are also members of the National Pain Task Force. Our scientific director, Dr. Norm Buckley, is on the advisory panel of the task force. The CPN is also wanting to identify biomarkers in pain research.
So thank you very much to Krista and Casey. I didn't see Casey. Where's Casey? Casey, yeah. And thanks to Janet for your excellent presentation. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Malcolm King. Oh, there he is. He's coming right up to speak about Diabetes Action Canada. Dr. King is a faculty member in Community Health and Epidemiology at the University of Saskatchewan and is SCPOR's scientific director. So please join me in welcoming Dr. King.
Thank you very much, Candace. So I'm at this moment speaking not in my role as scientific director of SCPOR, but as chair of the steering committee of Diabetes Action Canada. So that's one of 5 chronic disease networks that were funded 3 years ago. We've heard from some of the others so far. Like all of these chronic disease networks, actually, they were required to bring in at least 50% matching funding from a variety of partners to go along with the funding that was received from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. And so you can see this whole list of partners that includes academic centers and charitable organizations, Diabetes Canada, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, Heart and Stroke, for instance, various federal and provincial agencies, not just CIHR, and importantly, industry partners that are able to provide funding that allows for patient-oriented research that actually is not directly tied to patents and things like that that might otherwise be. These are we're set up as a network, and I'm not officially a partner in the network. I'm actually just the chair of the steering council because my main role is here in Saskatchewan with SCPOR. But these important topics are part of what we do: retinopathy, screening to prevent blindness, working with eye doctors, Indigenous people's health, because that's a very important thing. Diabetes is one of the most common issues in Indigenous peoples in Canada. Aging, community and health research, aging in diabetes, digital health for diabetes research and care. Well, that gets into things such as registry, but also apps to allow people with diabetes to follow what's happening with them and to make more rapid adjustments. Innovations in type 1 diabetes, that's a very important aspect of of diabetes where the pancreas actually fails and people need insulin lifelong, and foot care to prevent amputations. And then there are a number of enabling programs. Patient engagement, certainly extremely important and necessary. Knowledge translation, taking advantage of what has been found and what will be found and putting it into policy and practice. Training and mentoring, not just students, but also community participants. Bringing in sex and gender issues into diabetes, their research, they're important, and health technology assessment, and so on. Patient engagement, that's our real core, as it is with the other networks. And we have not only a general patient circle, a national organization or network of patient family advisors, but three other groups that interact with them. A group for Francophones exclusively, because many of our Francophone patient partners, not all of them located in Quebec, but a lot of them, of course, find it difficult to communicate in English, and that's an important aspect that we wanted to address. Our Indigenous circle, and we do have an overlap with the CanSolve CKD network. Many of our participants are also associated with CanSolve CKD. We're a small group nationally, and the overlap in terms of the kidney complications of diabetes is obvious. And then there's a patient group devoted to new immigrants. So this is one of our patient partners. She's been with the network right from the beginning as a founding member. Debbie Sismore is blind with type 1 diabetes. She lost her eyesight many years ago and lives very well, actually, with her disability, and she's a full participant in our council. She's a voting member of the Diabetes Action Canada Council. We have, I mentioned this before, so one of the things about our network, and I think they're all very much the same, we listen to our patient partners. And one of the things that our patient partners brought up during the first year or so is that we weren't devoting enough attention to aging with diabetes. It's an important, so Diabetes Action Canada linked up and brought in a group at McMaster that are nurse-led, leading a project on improved self-management in a number of areas, but this one particularly focused on type 2 diabetes above the age of 65. And so that's actually a big addition to our network. Another way in which we listened is in the complications of diabetes. So we have, I'll get to this part of it, the youth mentorship, but our Indigenous patient group told us very strongly, you're not paying enough attention to what's really important, which is the risk of amputations with advanced type 2 diabetes. And so the network recruited experts in topics such as microcirculation and so on, and really beefed up that part of our mandate for dealing with diabetes. The other important aspect, and it's really blossomed, is the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program. And that includes a group here in Saskatoon and really all across Western Canada, bringing youth, high school age youth, and even elementary school youth in terms of mentorship into understanding better about healthy living and essentially avoiding the risk factors and development of type 2 diabetes, which can come at a very early age otherwise in children. So we offer a number of things, expertise in patient engagement and implementation science. Our patients are part of that expertise. They know what needs to be done, and it's important for all of our SPOR networks to really consider this. Community partner intervention, in this case for seniors with diabetes. Indigenous health interventions focused on the prevention of diabetes in youth. Health informatics, digital health solutions. We're developing registries, certainly well developed in type 1 diabetes and working on it in the much larger community of type 2 diabetes. Collaboration with experts in machine learning and artificial intelligence, making better use of these apps that are ubiquitous, and working with integrated care models, networking with individuals with type 1 diabetes, and so on. So I'll just finish with that, and thank you very much for your attention. Chimiigwech.
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm King. So last but not least, we want to welcome Dr. Nazim Muhajireen and Janice Braden to come and talk to us about PICI. No, I'm not going to say the whole thing, Candace. I just refuse. So thanks so much. Dr. Muhajireen is a faculty member in community health and epidemiology at the U of S. And Janice, of course, is our provincial network manager with PICI and a neighbor to Skipper. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Nazim Muhajireen, I just want to, before we get going here, well, Janice and I am going to do a little bit of a tag team presentation. I realize that we are the last of the four, and so I want to acknowledge Vivian Ramsden, who is a core member of our team. I want to acknowledge Candace Kaprek, who is also a core member of our team. You'll see reference to them again later on. You know, there are three things that I think that we want to communicate and achieve in the 10-15 minutes and later on when we have Q&A and networking. We want to share with you a different model of SPOR research network research. You have heard about 3 or 4 of them, and this is another one, but I think it is structured differently than the ones that you heard. A second thing is that we want to talk to you a bit about what we have done and opportunities. Opportunities are fast disappearing in relation to PICI because we are actually at the end of our research network mandate. So we are really talking about, as Chris said, SPOR PICI 2.0. Hopefully that will be in place less than a year's time or a year's time. So maybe like this transition period is important to put forward right away. And the third thing is, with that in mind, we want to participate in a discussion about sustainability, not only sustainability of the research network on primary integrated healthcare innovation, but also SPOR itself. So those are the three motivation things that I have in mind as we move forward. So a quick overview. This is what we are hoping to do in the next 10-15 minutes. So what is SPOR PICI? SPOR PICI is really a network of networks. Unlike other SPOR research networks, we are in all 10 provinces in Canada and one of the territories. So we are really a research infrastructure that is focused on primary healthcare delivery models and evaluating the effectiveness of these primary healthcare delivery models for patients with complex needs. Of course, doing this research in a patient-centered way and align with provincial policies. And these are important sort of features of PICI that may be a little bit different from other research networks. So we are a network of networks. We are in all of Canada. It's a truly pan-Canadian that way. We are at the end of the 5-year network development grant. In our case, it actually ends in March 2020, really December 31st, 2019, but we have a little bit of a carryover to March 31st, 2020. And some of the other provinces also are in the same stage as we are. And the research that we have supported have come in 3 ways. Quick strike projects, research synthesis, policy analysis, and 2 to 3 year length program grants. And I'll talk a little bit more about those as well. So the Leadership Council is small, and you see the people here. It's a tripartite leadership model, again, somewhat different from other research networks. So what we mean by tripartite is that there's a lead for science or research, a lead for a clinical lead in practice, and a lead for policy. So the 3 people you see there are those. And in our council, we also have Candace and Jackie Crow and Dr. William Ramsden, who is everything in terms of, kind of representing the whole, both patient, research, and community, and so forth. We also used to have a representative from Health Quality Council as well before Gary left. In terms of the membership of PICI Research Network, we are in Saskatchewan. We have about 130 members. They represent the academic community, people from the academic community, patients, policy analysts, healthcare providers, and health system leaders. When we started PICI in 2013-14, we did not anticipate that we will be moving into one health region, in 2017. And that actually has presented both a bit of a disruption to our plans, but also in that disruption, opportunities as well. It's sort of like the Chinese, where the crisis is also where there's an opportunity. And one of the things that has kind of propelled us to focus on is how do we deliver integrated primary health care for patients with complex needs, patient-oriented, in a single health care delivery model. And we are not the only province that's in this place. Nova Scotia, of course, Alberta, 10 years ahead of us, BC and other places as well. You see the institutions that are involved in this. I think you're going to take over from here? Okay.
So we have a dual mandate that we are supposed to operate from. One is that we are supposed to be responsive to the priorities of whatever province it is that the PICI network resides in. So in Saskatchewan, every year we go through the Ministry of Health's mandate to see just what their priorities are for primary care at that time. They have an annual plan that they put out. And we start looking at where we can interact with them to be able to support their goals. So, and then as well, we have a CIHR mandate that I'll get to on the next slide. So right now in Saskatchewan, this is a reflection of what the Government of Saskatchewan's Ministry of Health priorities are for primary and integrated care. It's interesting because the words integrated care, when we started this in 2014, didn't actually appear anywhere in the mandate. In the course of this last few years, though, of course, integrated care, going from 13 health regions to a single health region, has become the singular policy priority, getting that right, getting all of that infrastructure in place. And so we have had to step up, and it's been interesting because our title is Primary and Integrated Healthcare, and I think it's fair that among all of our partners in other provinces, really the emphasis in the early days was on primary. And when Saskatchewan moved to this model, we kind of stepped up and said, we'd better do something if we're going to really make ourselves relevant. So we've actually become a leader in Canada on working on how to bring integrated care and research, bring an evidence-informed base to the work that's happening in integrated care. And now this is happening in 7 provinces that have interest in some way of bringing integrated care systems in. Okay, you can see primary care delivery is another priority, seniors' health, mental health and addictions. Nazim will talk about one of the projects that we've been working on here related to that. And then in some form or another, emergency department wait times has been a constant over the last 5 years, as I'm sure you've heard. From CIHR's perspective, the priority areas have been, again, in integrated health. They'd like to see some work happening in e-health. They'd like to see that area of complex needs that you see next and social determinants. The intermix of those has been a main priority for the networks across the country. So how do you work with that population of the complex needs patients? Those are the people who are, it's only 5% of the people, but they take 50% plus of the budget. And so it's often people who have 2 or more things that are going wrong, and their needs are not being met properly through the delivery they have. So identifying those groups, finding different pathways to get better care has been a big part of the priority for this area. Social determinants, of course, include issues like levels of income, housing status, race and ethnicity, and those other kinds of factors that play into how people receive their care and whether or not they receive equitable levels of it. So as we move into the scope, what have we been doing for the last 4.5 years as we move into this? So one of the big areas that we have been doing is as research support. So as Nazim mentioned, we don't actually conduct research. And in a lot of ways, we're not actually determining our own research agenda like the other networks have been. CIHR determines just what we are supposed to do our research on. We went to the research community's members and asked, what are the areas that are your priorities for support? All of their projects are supposed to have interjurisdictional teams involved in them. They're supposed to have matching funds. They're supposed to have patient engagement plans. When we talked to the researchers, they said, we need help finding interjurisdictional partners, we need help finding matching funds, and we need help with the patient engagement plan. So that's a big part of what we did. I want to leave enough time for Nazim to talk about the actual research that happened. So we have been working on meeting those needs in different ways, working with other provinces, We have a research assistant support fund that we've given grants to 4 researchers who have now hired 7 different research assistants to become trained in patient-engaged techniques. Some of them are graduate students, others are community-based researchers, so we're not just sticking with the academic community. We were already in year 3 before SCPOR came around. So now there's the great patient engagement research workshops, but we didn't have those in the beginning. So our researchers identified that they really needed help in how to actually create patient engagement plans. So we partnered with the North American Primary Care Research Group, Canada, the United States, Mexico. They operate there. A number of people here are very involved in that group, and we brought them up, and they conducted workshops in Saskatoon and Regina to talk about just how to actually create plans, and those were a huge success. Okay.
Great, thank you. The network itself doesn't do research, but people involved in the network definitely do research. And so there are 5, we selected 5 program research programs, 2 to 3, actually 3 to 4 year length research programs that are currently ongoing. They are listed here, and in each of these 5 research programs, there are Saskatchewan research leaders, co-PIs. The one that I will just say a little bit more about is the one that Jacqueline Quayle led from HQC. And this was a quick strike project, actually, hotspotting, identifying super users. So as Janice mentioned, it has been commonly identified observation that small number of patients with highly complex needs actually account for most of the cost, most of the stays in institutions, in hospitals, and so on. So trying to understand that group of people in relation to those who are just behind them, perhaps, just behind them in terms of being super users. We focus on mental health issues and addictions issues, and this was a project that we did in Saskatchewan and Ontario with ISIS there, and I think the outcome of this project was a certain set of recommendations that was sent to the Ministry of Health, and before we started moving into one health region, and the patients were very, very important. Patients' voices was very important in conducting this research. So altogether, in the last 5 years, there has been 40 projects that PICI has conducted. Some of them are still ongoing. Some of them are done. And altogether about $12 to $14 million that is supporting this research. Very quickly, in a couple of more minutes, in terms of policy development, we feel that in Saskatchewan in particular, we have had some engagement, actually quite a aggressive and vigorous engagement with policy people, and trying to align our research with policy needs, and also pushing policy as well. So we had that linking policy and research workshop in 2016. We had a 2-part health integration gathering, if I would put it that way, back in the fall last year. We brought together 80 people from Saskatchewan who were in the center of transitioning into the One Health Authority and creating networks, care networks, and making policy and so on. That led to a national in scope healthcare integration summit we just had in May 2019. And as Janice said, this was the first instance in the last 4 to 5 years in PICI where we had specifically focus on the integration side of primary integrated healthcare innovation. So we felt that although late in coming in this 5 to 7 year research network mandate, we did actually focus on integration, models of integration, and successful evidence for successful integration is few and far in between, no matter what jurisdiction you look at. And I think this will hopefully inform us, as we move forward to PICI 2.0. I think we did kind of talk about this. I serve on the National Leadership Council. I have been doing that since 2014, and PICI network is also led by a national coordinating office, and I think that is important. So it's truly the PICI research network is a research infrastructure platform for primary healthcare research. So this is the last slide, Charlene. You will be happy to know. And I guess what I will just say is that we are really in the middle of talking about sustainability. For PICI as well as for SPOR. For PICI, we think that one of the ideas that is really quite quickly identified and sort of remains on the table is this physician-based research networks, and some provinces, BC, Quebec, are examples, are far along, in this kind of model of research. Saskatchewan is not, and maybe we can do something there under the One Health Authority. And also, one of the really important things, one of the things that attracted me to PICI is that this is the first time that I have seen in Canada where health service research, health systems research, and patient-oriented research meeting social determinants of health. So the upstream factors that we talked about. Really, in Canada, in elsewhere as well, these two realms don't really actually talk to each other very much. But through PICI, we have begun to integrate social determinants of health, upstream factors for health, and health service, health systems research. So with that, I'll wrap up here. Thanks.
Thanks very much, you two, and thank you to all of the presenters today. You can see that part of what we were trying to do by managing the time was have enough of a presentation to whet your appetite, but leaving time that we could have some dialogue. So we have these experts in our midst and have a great opportunity for some questions. What I would make a comment on is so far what I've noted is I found this to be very informative, very intriguing, and I think there's invaluable work going on across the province. So we have an opportunity for some Q&A now. So I think somebody instructed me that you're supposed to push your button and ask your question so that if there's anybody online, they can hear it. And you need to hold your button down when you ask your question. So I think we're just open it up for questions. Okay, we've got one at the back.
I'll ask a question because no one else is asking a question, but I think it's an important one. And it's not at all a criticism of anything. From what I've heard, actually, what I heard is very encouraging. But I was on a review panel of grants this morning, of which the term Indigenous was being used as a category of research and intervention. And as a Métis person, I struggle enormously with this category because, and I made the comment, and I made it as a bit of a joke, but not joking so much, that Métis people are increasingly being socialized to become really good First Nations people because in these larger initiatives, our identities are not privileged, our symbols are not privileged, our culture is not privileged, and that
people because of Indigenous, and particularly in this case, the two-eyed seeing approach, which people are conflating into being something that means there's two identities. There's an Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous identity, and Western knowledge. And that really, it may not be the intention of the concept, but it's playing out that way. And so to these large networks, how are they addressing the complexity of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit identities in the country, not to mention the fact that there's even subcategories within those categories. And our province is incredibly complex. And two-eyed seeing, if you don't look at other aspects of culture, which our communities don't necessarily call colonization. So, for instance, in the North, being a Christian does not mean that you're a colonized person. It means that you're a Christian, and you are also a First Nations person that lives on the land, for instance. And so the complexity, I think, is really important because the lived experience, the patient experience, plays out in terms of the way in which you are in your body, in your community, in your home, every day. And that sometimes these categories that are very convenient for researchers and for policy developers and governments are just work for them, but they don't work at the community level, and they don't certainly work from a patient-oriented perspective.
So thank you. Let's cycle back through our networks and see what they have to say about the excellent comments that Dr. Tate has made. So let's go backwards and head over to Picky first. Gotcha.
I think I have to keep it, hold it. Okay, got it. I'll master it. No, I think what Caroline is raising is important for us to keep in mind. I guess one of the things that I didn't specifically say is that in terms of the whole issue of doing research in a way that is culturally sensitive, and particularly, actually doing it right, doing the right way, and given the history of Canada and so on. In PICI, we do it in two ways. In the governance structure, we have two, patient advocates, and who really bring that cultural sensitivity and patient sensitivity to the decisions that are made, in the network, in the Saskatchewan network. They read applications, they give comments, they challenge, they push, etc. For researchers to do research in a different way, in a better way. That is one. The second way that actually this issue is addressed, I think, is in each of the projects, each of the 40 projects that have been funded. Each research team will address this issue in a different way. So I think I'm going to just kind of leave it there, recognizing that others have to.
Yeah. Dr. King, any comments you want to make?
Yeah, so anyway, thank you for the chance to respond. So it's important to remember that this concept of two-eyed seeing, which was put forward by a number of elders, but in particular Albert Marshall of Mi'kmaq, is the idea of using one eye to look at things from an Indigenous lens and the other one to look at it from a Western. But each of those eyes are very complex eyes. They're not a single eye. If you wanted to think of it as an analogy, maybe think of insect eyes, and so no individual Indigenous community, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, is the same as the next one. And in fact, if you think about it, no two people are alike. No two communities in general are alike. And so it's really a conceptual or allegorical model. And think of it more as the group that you're working with. It may not even be, in fact, it isn't the whole of University of Saskatchewan, say, but it's a particular group working with the community, you each actually have complexity within this, and it's the idea that you're bringing the First Nations or Métis perspectives in the case of communities here, and in particular First Nations or Métis, not all of them, together with a particular group of academic or health system perspectives. So bottom line is we should all be careful not to consider First Nations and Métis peoples to be somehow uniform and apply a pan-Indigenous approach. That is, and so if we can remember that, I think we'll be much better off in terms of our relationships with our First Nations and Métis partners.
Great, thank you. What about our pain network? Anyone have any comments to make there? That's okay if you don't.
I was going to say that it's a good question and an important point, but I don't know the answer. The Pain Network does have an Indigenous Health Research Advisory Committee that has its own separate website, and there's places where people can make community profiles that are unique about their community, and there's some resources there. They do have information related to Nunavut. But I think that this is very early in developing, and it's an important feedback to take back. So,
thank you, Dr. Koppel. Did you have a comment or two?
So with regards to the Council CKD, we do have the Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council, which includes First Nations, Métis, but unfortunately not many Inuit are on that committee. And the people on that council really are very clear that not all Indigenous people and Métis are the same. And we actually have some specialized training that we go through from the First Nations and Inuit branch in British Columbia called SANYAS training. It's similar to what's offered here in Saskatchewan with the role of the healthcare professional in Indigenous health. And so so a lot of us have to make sure that we do that kind of training. So I think in the Council of CKD network, we're very sensitive to that not all people are the same. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Tate.
Great. Does anyone else have any comments on this piece before we head into another one? A very provocative and appropriate question. Thank you so much. Okay, over to you, Candace.
I'm just going to transition a bit from that question, Dr. Tate, because I think it speaks more broadly in some respects to the challenges that patients often face regardless of the patient, in having their voice heard and acknowledged. And so it does, to me, address the uniqueness of patient-oriented research and the value of bringing different perspectives, and most importantly, from my perspective, the patient perspective, to help inform the research. Although I often am called a patient advisor, a patient partner, I really can only speak for myself as a patient and my own patient experience. And I hope that through that opportunity and the opportunity that other patients have, it helps to address some of those very complex issues, and in particular, those that matter most to the patients themselves. So thank you for that question, because I think it does speak somewhat to the whole complexity of the patient voice, regardless of who the patient might be. So having said that, is there opportunity then for some of our patient partners in the room to ask a question or make a comment about what you have been hearing today, or more specifically your own experience within patient-oriented research. Not to put a damper on the room. I might have to...
Elder George.
Elder George, thank you.
It's on. Just keep your finger on that.
I just got to stick my finger in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. As you know, my name is George Lalberty. I'm working with these two young ladies here. I have what I came in for when I got invited. I was quite excited, and I still am, because I've seen a lot of good things that are coming through there. As an Aboriginal person, I was listening to Dr. King at some of the things that we talked about, as we are not all the same. And even in the province of Saskatchewan, when we travel with these two ladies here, I know that I've been all over. I've worked in BC, Ottawa, Ontario, and up in South Dakota, and also in Nova Scotia, and up in the territories. So I've known a lot of different people that live in the reserves and in urban settings, and their beliefs are a little different all over, and then even the language is different. So when we move in the province of Saskatchewan, working with Indigenous people, we got to be, at all times when we're working with these people, we got to be human. We got to be part of them. We got to put our hats off so that they acknowledge us, so that they open the doors, and for us to be able to work with them, no matter where we go. It's like that, because authority is something that is not really respected in our communities because of all the residential school traumas, and our people being moved from point A from the time they were born. In South Dakota, the stories come where they were chased all over the place because they wanted to take the land. So in that regard, a lot of our people don't want to get involved with the people that are bringing this kind of information. So we got to be very careful when we go in there and work with these people. We got to be human. We got to be caring. We got to put that hat aside so that we can be part of them, smoke with them, wear clothes like, these two ladies are always part of the team, and everybody just, they get in there and they talk. Everybody gives in. They just talk. They're part of our family. They invite us as part of theirs. But it takes a while. At first, usually I would say at least 2-3 meetings with people like that before they really start opening up. So when we get information from these people, which is the main idea of the research, a lot of people don't even understand what research is. So we got to really bring down some of our language, our university stuff. They don't understand that. I don't understand some of the stuff that we just talked about. I understand collaborate and stuff like that. So we gotta sit down and understand those concepts in different communities. Some of them don't even speak the language, so we gotta have an interpreter, someone that can speak to them first. But most of the times, what I try to tell people when they come in to these research, if you don't speak or if you don't understand, get your brother, your sister, your daughter, your son to come and sit with you, so that you can pass all the proper information that is being brought out. So that's part of the thing, and there's a lot more, but I'm not going to keep you guys. I'm kind of getting hungry, so. But I'm very thankful that I was invited by my team here. It's they make me feel like I belong. Part of them, the three of us. We're not any bigger than the others just because they got university. I got university, but it's all Mother Earth. So that's the teaching that I have. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, I just have a question. I'm Mallory Keller. I'm the Patient Engagement Platform Lead with SCPOR. And within all of the presentations today that we saw that there are patients from Saskatchewan involved in all the networks, but it's a small number. And I'm just wondering about the opportunity as we look for renewal and future versions. I think we're seeing 2.0 as the common language. How can we try to encourage the national networks to engage more Saskatchewan patients? Because I think that's where SCPOR and the networks can really work together and make sure that Saskatchewan is on the map.
So with regards to Cancel CKD, we partner with the Kidney Foundation of Canada, and the Kidney Foundation of Canada is trying to set up regional patient councils so that they would be involved with research or projects, because not all projects are research. I think that needs to be made very clear to this room that the project that we discussed that we are doing here in Saskatchewan is not a research project. It's a project that's co-developing tools that will help First Nations and Métis people make decisions about what happens when their kidneys don't work anymore. That's not a research project. And so I think we have to sometimes be real careful about the language that we use.
Sure. Thanks for that question. So nationally with SPOR Picky, it's an area that we've been doing a fair bit of work in the last year, and I think there's going to be more opportunities opening up. In fact, we have a national patient engagement committee that's going to be looking for members very soon. We've just developed a national patient engagement framework that's got more meat on the bones that it had. You know, one of the things that we found in our network in particular, in the early days, we were doing things that CIHR hadn't done before. So a lot of our work was a lot of administrative stuff where it was hard for patients to get involved when we're developing websites to figure out how people can apply for things. You know, it wasn't the best place to draw. And now we're all saying, okay, no, now we've got that stuff done. So we really want to be bringing more people in, and we recognize that the projects where patients have been heavily involved have been among the most successful, and both patients and researchers reported that they were the most successful. So I think there's going to be more opportunities that are going to be coming. So for any patients that are here that are interested in primary and integrated care, please see me afterwards, and we can talk about it a bit more.
I just had a different question. If people are still answering that one, I can wait. I'm just curious. I had to step out of the room. Sorry, urgent phone call. But the physician-based research networks, I'm just curious why it's physician-based and not the most appropriate interprofessional person for that. You may have discussed it, but to me, when we're looking at particularly my long-term care work, physician is not necessarily the best to lead or to be the network for my work and for the work of long-term care across the nation and globally. So I'm kind of curious why we've kind of selected physician-based and not the interprofessional person or the most appropriate person to be able to lead those networks.
Maybe I'll quickly answer that question. I mean, that's a very good observation. I think the intent behind that is not just physicians. It is actually all clinicians, all clinical providers. Perhaps Viv, you could kind of chime in on this as well. Did Vivian leave? Yeah. So I think it's a good observation. It is meant to really be clinical, providers, and not just only physicians. Physicians, GPs tend to act like the gatekeepers, for primary care, primary health care. But that being said, they are not the only people, who are in a team of care. So we understand that. Yeah.
Sorry, if I can just supplement a little bit of that. One other big aspect of the physician-based networks, it's about data. And so physicians are the ones who who hold patient data. And so the physician-based research networks are often about getting physicians who are willing to share their patient data into a common data pool, so researchers would be able to draw from that. So, for example, if you were the Diabetes Network and you were wanting to do research on 13 to 15-year-old boys, well, trying to go out and recruit 100 13 to 15-year-old boys who have diabetes would be very difficult. But when you have some of these databases that exist in other provinces, you suddenly have a pool of 50,000 or 100,000 patients, and you can go and just do a search and identify that population of people, and it's used as a starting point for other research. So that's what we're looking at supporting. It would be a tool that many would be able to work from.
I'm a patient advisor, and I just have one comment to make. And actually, I tag on to Elder George's comments. It's how do we talk to the people? And I think one of the things we have to look at, if we want to engage other patient family advisors, we need to almost give a glossary of what all these acronyms are. Because I've worked in healthcare all my life. I'm a former board chair of one of the health authorities, so I know a lot of them, but there's some that are evolving daily, it seems. And so to get Joe Q public interested and engaged, they're almost intimidated when they hear Kai, picky, score, blah, 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 and they don't know. So I think it's almost a glossary of what these things mean, so people might say, hey, yeah, that does appeal to me. I have something I could give.
That's a really great comment. And just to follow up on that, it is something that comes up on a regular basis in many different contexts around the disconnect in the language. And so somehow trying to find a common language that is respectful of everyone is really key in the conversations. There are certainly jargon busters available and can be helpful, but that doesn't address the whole issue. So, we got the sign. The 1 minute sign. Gotcha.
Candice, do you want to speak about the SCPOR Patient Family Advisory Council guide for acronyms?
Oh, okay. Yes. So on the SCPOR website, there is within the patient section a kind of a jargon buster, but a guide. So that's another place that you can find acronym descriptions. Thank you. Okay, so I think that we have come to the end of this part of the session. We will be sending out a short survey following the event, of course. So we want to get your feedback, and so if you could take a few minutes just to fill out the survey for us. A very special thank you to all of the presenters for sharing your information with us, and we would ask if the presenters could just meet at the front, I think. Yeah, and just before we move into the next session. So I should say, was there anything from WebEx? Do we know? We're good? Okay. Yeah, so now we have just an opportunity for open networking in room 1B03. And I think Mallory is going to be the parade director. If you don't know where that is, she will help lead you. So thank you very much again for all of your participation. Elder George.
Just quickly, nobody likes that sign. And when you said that, it reminded me of the research that has been going on, and no matter where or when. I believe it's too short. Like today, we got so many good presenters, and we don't have enough time. I think we need to hear more, and we need to explain more of what we do. And the 5-year research that people are doing out there is not even quite enough, because there's other work that I know you guys are working in different fields. So when I go to a group like that, a session, I find that it's way too short. That I don't get a lot of the stuff that, and I believe that the presenters could have been wanting to explain more of what, and the questions need to be clarified in a lot of the areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's almost in every event, that's such a common comment, one that we are challenged with. This, I hope, just gave you a little flavor and the connections now to talk to the people more directly who are involved in some of these opportunities. So we will draw this session to a close and move now to the networking. Thank you very much.